When La Vie de Bicicleta was distributed in America, it was given the title The Bicycle Thief, but its actual translation, Bicycle Thieves, was given to later releases of the film. Now this sounds like a minor detail, but it will become important later. Bicycle Thieves is the story of Antonio, a man in post-World War II Italy who receives a job offer. He needs a bicycle to perform it, and when he finally gets one, it's stolen, and Antonio must search the city to recover it. Bicycle Thieves is one of the most well-known examples of Italian neorealism. Understanding neorealism requires historical context. Art movements sometimes spring up for reasons of influence from other art forms or masterpieces from sudden new prodigies in their fields, but art is also cultural and reflects attitudes of its time, recent history, and tragedy. To that end, we need to discuss Fascist Italy in World War II. When discussing the Axis powers, Nazi Germany and Japan always come to mind, but Italy was very much a part of the Axis. In fact, Italy was expanding its territory through military might before what we would consider the beginning of World War II in 1939. Italy under Prime Minister Benito Mussolini actually forcibly colonized Ethiopia in a war that lasted between 1935 and 1936. Italy also played a role in supporting nationalists in the Spanish Civil War in 1936, in hopes of gaining favor with the victors and hopeful subservience. There's even more, but the long and short of it is that Italy was actively engaged in taking over parts of the Mediterranean even before what we would consider World War II. Italy waited until 1940 before declaring war on Great Britain and France. All told, Italy lost almost 300,000 soldiers in the war and over 150,000 civilians. War has a habit of influencing art and philosophy. For the latter, the war furthered interest in existentialism. For the former, at least in Italy, we were given Neorealism. Italians wondered about their national identity and who they really were as a people. Because of these introspective attitudes, this film style flourished. So what is Italian Neorealism? Well, first, it focuses on the poor, the working class who are trying to survive in post-war Italy. Real hardships. It's generally filmed on location and not in sound stages. Real cities. The style insists on non-professional actors. Real people. In short, Italian neorealism is the attempt to set aside any self-glorification or decadence, and through both the narrative and the technique, create something real. Not a documentary, but a fictional narrative without falsehoods and storybook endings. A real window into the soul of Italy. Vittorio De Sica once said that neorealism isn't meant to be reality, but reality filtered through poetry. That may be the best definition. Realism sounds like it wouldn't have as much to say as something more expressive, but even a portrait can tell tales. This is American Gothic, a famous work by Grant Wood, painted realistically. But notice the commentary on labor. Look closely. The pitchfork scene here is replicated in the stitching on the man's clothes, and his jawline, and the window that draws the eye. Commentary made from realistic representation. And that brings us back to Bicycle Thieves. Everything in the film is shot to show the desperation of the workers, and income inequality. Take for example this scene. Antonio's job involves pasting posters on walls. The one we see displayed most prominently is a poster of Rita Hayworth, a famous Hollywood movie star. Antonio, struggling for work, desperately trying to make ends meet, going to great lengths just to get a bicycle, has a job in which he hangs up posters of the rich and famous. The imagery here is striking, letting us know that the glitz and glamour of Hollywood in the 1940s is an illusion, but neorealism, what we're seeing here, is a closer representation of the real world. Economic division is shown again in this scene, as Antonio and Bruno eat inexpensive food at a restaurant while a wealthier family sits at the next table. They are styled to be their opposites. The whole family is there. They can all afford to eat together in a big meal. The son has his hair curled and well managed, whereas Bruno's hair is tousled. The cinematography of Bicycle Thieves centers around long, static shots, like this one. The camera is less of a participant and more like a spy, watching the characters without judgment or romanticization. Shots in which other citizens of the city are walking by or driving feel less staged and more natural. Even this scene, in which Bruno is almost struck by traffic, is played off as just a minor occurrence, although that's probably because it was an accident. The young actor really was almost struck by passing cars. That's not to say that much of the film was improvised. Most of it was meticulously planned by De Sica. It looks natural. There are very few close-ups in the film. Usually we see the entirety of each character in the frame, or at least 2/3 of them in walking scenes. It gives us this sense that they're real people, with real problems, and not just props moving around set pieces. The film primarily used non-professional actors and first-time actors. I say first-time because Lamberto Maggiorani, the actor who played Antonio, actually started acting professionally after shooting this film. This had less to do with a sudden love of acting and more because, in a frightening display of life-imitating art, he found himself unemployed. Director Vittorio De Sica once said of non-professional actors, "The man in the street, particularly if he is directed by someone who is himself an actor, is raw material that can be molded at will. It is sufficient to explain to him those few tricks of the trade which may be useful to him from time to time, to show him the technical and, in the best sense of the term, of course, the histrionic means of expression at his disposal. It is difficult, perhaps impossible, for a fully trained actor to forget his profession. It is far easier to teach it, to hand on just the little that is needed, just what will suffice for the purpose at hand." In addition to Bicycle Thieves helping to revolutionize film in its era and usher in a new style, it also employs tried-and-true narrative devices to capture the audience in the story, namely foreshadowing. Early in the film, Maria hands Antonio his cap that he needs for work. She jokes that he looks kind of like a police officer. Later in the film, after his bicycle is stolen, he informs the police what happened. But they tell him they are powerless to do anything. Antonio is upset, asking if he must now solve his own crime. The police do nothing. And so Antonio has made himself as a sort of police officer, because the actual police don't see it as a major crime. The police appear again and again in the film, never willing to do anything. Bicycle Thieves conveys a mistrust of police. Bear in mind, Italy was only recently under the thumb of Mussolini and an Axis power. There is bound to be some mistrust of government in an Italian neorealist film. Another example of foreshadowing is the title itself. Remember, when Americans first saw the film, they thought it should be called The Bicycle Thief. But the real translated title is Bicycle Thieves, plural. Antonio, frustrated that he can't find his bicycle, steals another one. The title is foreshadowing. There are two. Only when Antonio steals the bike does the title begin to make sense. The build-up to Antonio stealing the bike is incredible. After trying everything else, he sits down with his son, looking defeated, and then sees bicycles everywhere, riding by, carried by people, everywhere. If only he could have one. This goes on for a couple minutes, and the suspense is both thrilling and uncomfortable. We've spent the last hour and a half sympathizing with this man who wants nothing more than to take care of his family. Then a wide-angle shot of Antonio near the bicycle, still debating it in his mind, looking around, creeping closer and closer, until finally making his decision, all the while not knowing his son is nearby, about to discover what his father has become. Then he's caught. Watch this scene.
Dove portiamo? Al Flaminio ai Parioli?
Al Flaminio? Al Flaminio non dove portare? Ci andiamo tanti adesso, se no si appolla il commissariato. Ci andiamo io e Pasquale e basta.
Lascia stare, lascio perdere. E mo me la ciò qui.
Non voglio impicci, lascio stare. Buongiorno a tutti e grazie.
Bella roba che insegna al tuo figlio. Manco la vergogna.
Sei fortunato che hai trovato quello lì, ma se era per me te ci portavo dentro.
Vattene a casa che ti ha detto bene. Va, tira, tira. È meglio che te ne vai, va.
The owner doesn't press charges. Why not? We'll come back to that in a minute. The causes of crime are complex and specific to individual acts. There are crimes of passion, hate, but what people sometimes don't want to face is that crime is often an act of desperation, of poverty. Antonio didn't ask for Italy to go to war and create this mess for his country, but he must face the consequences of more powerful men. It's easy to say, well, he shouldn't have stolen the bicycle, but this is a man faced with extreme poverty and the responsibility of taking care of his family. Should his child starve because of the finer points of morality? It's an impossible situation. What is his greater responsibility? To the law or to his family? That doesn't excuse his actions, but it should explain them. We don't want to consider poverty as a cause of crime, because that means that we as a society have failed, and that we bear some responsibility for the ills of our culture. So why did the owner let him go? Because he recognized why Antonio did it. For his son. He's not a malevolent person, he's just desperate. The world can be harsh and cruel. This scene isn't just about forgiveness, it's also about understanding. In a sense, Bicycle Thieves is not a morality play. It doesn't say what Antonio does at the end is right, only that it is explainable and shouldn't be dismissed as just a vile, malicious act. Even in the beginning of the film, when Antonio gets a job, we find that people have been categorized into occupations, pigeonholed into their professions, creating a sense that their lives are predetermined, fated into a kind of caste system. There's a line from the film that I rather like. Antonio says to Bruno, "There's a cure for everything but death." He says it cheerfully, but to me, the line always feels like it means, we have to survive. To quote words far wiser than my own, it's easy to be a saint in paradise. But out there are no saints, just people.